Richard is back. Hello, Richard.
And it's been far, far too long and entirely my fault for being away.
I know. Well, the thing is, as I said to you earlier, if you're going to go and retire and have, a month's break, which I think is probably, I think that's okay, then we're going to have a bit of a gap.
Very, very true. I'm come back refreshed, and it's time for action again.
Time for action. We like that. Okay, well, let's just jump straight in then with some questions that we've had sent in. Some of these are interesting, actually, but here's your first one. Question number one, that says something. Question number one. I have seen so many people, mainly fitness influencers, dipping their faces in icy water as part of their morning routine. Do you know why people might do this? Could it benefit your skin or mental health or something else? And I asked this is me talking, with the knowledge we know we've done cold dips, but this is something slightly different or not?
Well, it wasn't specifically mentioned in the various cold dip articles that I read about. I can simply think that it's waking you up, getting your head round the fact that you've got something important to do, and icy water will certainly startle you into that. Probably get the adrenaline going a bit. So it doesn't fully fit into the whole cold dips thing because it's not your whole body. But I think it's literally a wake up call for the body to get going.
Cool. Okay, another one for you. Why can't I read that? A question be even better, wouldn't it? There we go. Right, question for Dr. Scott. I read a new study that during and after childbirth, the mother's brain shrinks. Okay, and that grey matter decreases while white matter increases. Then the statement, what? How does that work?
Well, I would have to read that. I must say, I really can't comment on something as extraordinary as that without actually reading it up myself. Perhaps, if you don't mind, I'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah, that's fine. That was yes. Just during and after childbirth, the mother's brain shrinks, the grey matter decreases while the white matter increases. I didn't even know there was grey and white matter. Say that's every day's a learning day for me on that one alone. I like the fact that you don't know the answer and you'll go and find it. That's good.
I mean, we know that people talk about baby brain subsequently because just mothers are so exhausted looking after babies, not getting enough sleep, and perhaps stimulation is a bit reduced generally. But I wasn't aware, and we'll have to see what the research says about the specific changes in the different parts of the brain. Let me look it up.
No, that's fine. I know you have much knowledge, but there are limits to everybody's own knowledge, isn't there? Right, one more for you. Open up. Right, I heard a debate about whether we might be addicted to our mobile phones from the Good News Broadcasting Association, which we put on Pure Brunch here on Pure 24/7 Radio. I learnt a new word. Let me try and get this right. Nomophobia. Nomophobia. The fear of anxiety caused by not having a working phone. It got me thinking of the health issues, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, of our mobile phones. I would love Dr. Scott's thoughts on this, on the issues of addiction to phones or using our phones too much. What are the signs and symptoms, perhaps, of using our phone too much? And what is the treatment? And I think I have a suggestion for the treatment myself, but I'll turn to you.
Well, you're absolutely right, and this has been well documented that teenagers, young people, I think it applies even beyond the youth, but do get extremely anxious if their phones are taken away from them, which is part of the issue where schools want to take phones away, and it's going to create all sorts of a backlash from them, even though it might be good for them. And certainly we know, say, for example, addiction to alcohol, that one of the features is that people want to drink first thing in the morning. First thing you do, the first thing you think about is a drink. And I'm quite sure that the first thing many people think about is, where's my phone? What's happened since I last looked at my phone? And that is a form of addiction, there's no doubt. And we've looked before at some sort of, not just, but not a whole subject, but from time to time touching the dangers that social media has. Kids using it for 5 hours a day and extraordinary. And it does certainly change the brain. There's been studies that show that brains change literally. Some areas increase, other areas shrink. There's no doubt that addiction takes place from the sort of sociological point of view, and brain changes occur as well. So yes, nomophobia. People will indeed show signs of anxiety. That you've just labelled the type of phobia it is, and phobia just implies a fear of not having something, or fear of being in a situation that you don't like, and absolutely not having your phone fits the bill.
I've heard, I don't know if this is the same sort of thing, but some people don't, if they can't touch their phone, they can't physically put their hands on it. That's another I don't know if it's a phobia or an addiction, but there's like, I've got to know where my phone is at all times. Now, if you're a dad expecting a baby, I can understand there's a moment in your life when I need to know where my phone is. I know a guy who played football back in the day in the 80s, 90s. He bought a pager, which cost him a fortune because he wanted to make sure as soon as his wife went into labor, she had immediate contact. And mobile phones were a little bit new back then. But I do know today with phones, some people, they just, it's got to be within reach. Otherwise, they start to freak out.
Absolutely. Probably, I think of my father-in-law who was a pipe smoker, and he wasn't always smoking it, but he was touching it, rubbing it, playing with it, filling it, tapping it. It reassured him, and I think that was quite quaint in those days. Although I might say smoking didn't do him any good in the end. I think it's along more serious lines with the mobile phone. If you're having to touch something to make sure that you know it's there and it just makes you feel better, I think you need to look at your life.
So when I was trucking and I was loading an articulated trailer onto the tractor unit, I would often, when I'd finished putting everything together, I would go around and touch every single thing, not in some weird thing, but I just wanted to know that it was solid and it was connected. Now, that feels to me like quite a sensible thing to make sure that when I get back in my cab, I know that all the airlines are connected, the brakes are taken off the trailer and it's all locked into place. That seems fairly sensible to me, although some people thought it was weird. It's like, well, I've never dropped a trailer, which is quite possible. The only time I dropped a trailer was when I got distracted by the company I was working for, who ran me 17 million times. But basically, it's a good thing to know where things are. But of course, that can always go too far.
Absolutely. And it's a form of OCD, ultimately. If you have to touch things and where is it all the time, your brain is just completely taken over by an area of life that is ultimately unhealthy.
But the question, which I'm going to refer to you, because you have the doctor title, I don't. What's the treatment for nomophobia?
Well, I think you chuckled, and I think you've got the answer yourself. I would say desensitization. I touch your phone less, use your phone less. But to do that, you actually would need to write down, okay, currently where am I at? Okay, 5.5 hours a day. I'm going to reduce that. A bit like, say somebody, so many alcoholics came to see me. How much are you drinking? Let's be honest about this. Okay, well, I'm having at least 8 pints a day. Okay, well, we'll call it, should we call it 12, to be honest? Yeah, 12's about right. Okay. Next week, I want you to drink 11 pints a day. Not 0, not 5, 11. And if you do that, and then the week after it will be 10, we'll go down. And in 12 weeks, you're off, as long as you stick to the plan. And you'll barely notice it. So that's a sort of desensitization program for alcohol. And sometimes people do a bit of diazepam to help them along the way. You get slip-ups, of course. But if you follow a plan, and that's not a drastic plan, but my goodness, it'll, 1/12, and then it's a 1/11 down, then 1/10 down, then 1/9 down. You're making big strides while barely noticing it. And I would say the same for a phone. Okay, 5.5 hours. Tomorrow, 5 hours. Day after, 4.5. Stick to it. And if you do that, wow, you're dealing with issues.
Excellent. Thank you. And then we have one more for you. I'd like to answer this one, but I'm not going to. I'm wondering, is it bad to itch your eyes?
Wow. Now, well, first we have to ask yourself, why are your eyes itching?
Yes.
And so there are common causes, hay fever being number one, for example. Perhaps you're getting irritated by substances at work, whatever. So I think the first thing is, hang on, why have I got itchy eyes? And that probably, you'd benefit from talking to a medic about that. Because if you're simply itching them, A, you're going to make them red and sore, and B, it's probably not going to deal with the itch. And the other thing is certainly in other parts of the body, the skin, there is a definite thing called the itch-scratch reflex, where itching increases, rather scratching increases itch because it releases histamine and other itchy substances within the body, which actually make the situation worse. So I think the first thing is find out why you've got itchy eyes.
Yes. Simple things, too much strain on a computer, he says, sitting in front of a studio light, in front of a monitor. But that's an easy one. I don't have that. I have had it in the past. If you're sitting in a cross draft, there's a simple one for you. If you've got air coming across your eyes, they're getting drier than you actually are realizing. All of a sudden, or perhaps the car vent is pointing at your face, it's going to dry out. Air conditioning, of course, dries it out faster. There's another one. There's loads of reasons for it. But yes, scratching your eyes, just no. It's...
Sounds painful. It can be dealt with, and once we know the cause, there's plenty of treatments, and for hay fever particularly, antihistamines and eye drops can make an enormous difference to someone's life. But need to think why.
Indeed, there we have it. If you've got any questions for Richard, just before we move on, if you've got any questions for Dr. Richard, you can get in touch with us here. Hello at pure247radio.org. Hello at pure247radio.org. And just saying, I have a question for Richard, for Richard Scott. And he will do his best to answer it or go off and research it. And I will resist answering questions because I didn't do a medical degree. Richard, where would you like to go for this evening?
Well, thank you. Well, as I mentioned, I have been away. I spent the best part of 4 weeks with Heather and two friends in Scotland. It was part of a retirement package, but along the way, I wanted God to speak to me. Heather retired 6 months earlier than me. She did a pilgrimage for 3.5 weeks from little island of Iona off the bottom of Scotland on the western side, all the way across lower Scotland into England, finishing up at Lindisfarne in Northumberland. And so she wanted to show us a few of the places in Scotland along the way that she'd visited in March. And I'm thinking, okay, Lord, that'll be good. But this is a bit of time. There's going to be an opportunity to listen to you. Teach me one or two things. And I believe he did. So what I wanted to bring back tonight was actually some encouragement to the listeners, because this isn't just about my life. It should always apply to other people. Otherwise, there's no point in me mentioning it on the radio. But something which I think will be of interest. So, first thing I wanted to mention was that we were about to get a ferry, and if you've ever got any maps at hand, you want to go from the west coast of Scotland across to an island called the Isle of Mull, and we went ultimately from Mull to another island, Iona, so using a few ferries. But we were just about to catch the ferry to Mull, and this Canadian couple in their 50s came up to me and said, "Oh, we're not quite sure. It was just round the corner from where you get the ferry. Which is the way to the ferry?" So we said, "Oh, it's just round the corner." They were getting the ferry the next day, and we chatted about Scotland, and they said, it's picture postcard perfect out here, just like Canada. And we'd like to go to Canada. So we were just chatting about that. We said that we were doing what's called the North Coast 500, where you go 500 miles around the coast of Scotland. You can either go clockwise or better still, anti-clockwise, which is what we did. So we were just chatting away, and yes, wasn't Scotland pretty? And it got me thinking, because Scotland, everybody knows that it's got mountains. 300 Munros. A Munro is a mountain over 3,000 feet. It's got 300 of them. So it's got mountains, it's got lochs. Did you know, little known fact, that Loch Ness alone, just one loch, has more water in it than all the lakes in England and Wales combined? And that's just in one loch. Wow. Not just because it's particularly long, but it's also deep, which is, of course, why Loch Ness Monster favours Loch Ness rather than go anywhere else. We didn't see her, unfortunately. But there's all this water, this wonderful waterfalls. But what I hadn't realised is the beaches were sensational. I live opposite the beach in Margate, particularly across the north of Scotland. You have to go and see it. It's so pretty. Which brings me to my first point, which is that we went to the Church of Scotland on our first Sunday, and that the lady minister had also been away for a few weeks, and she'd come back, and it was the start of the new church lectionary year, the lectionary being the readings. And so she started reading Genesis 1 and John chapter 1. Relevant to me, because I was about to go back to my own church and preach on God the Father. So I thought, I must listen. Genesis 1. God created everything from nothing. And in John chapter 1, nothing that has been made was made without him. So if you like, from nothing, God made Scotland in all its magnificence. And equally turning it around, the magnificence that I was seeing on a daily basis pointed to our Creator God. So that was great. Looking at gannets, fishing, or seals, do what seals do on islands, and nipping into the water to have a fish. Even the heather in Scotland, which is massive, and after which my wife was named as she was conceived in Scotland all these years ago. An unnecessary fact, perhaps. However, the truth. And so, I was in a really good mood. And then Heather said, "I want you to come and see a prayer house that I visited in a place called Dalmeny." Great, we said. So we go to this lovely Catholic prayer house, and there's an old boy of 92 called Callum, an ex-deer stalker. God had told him to build a prayer house. So he did. And he had a Catholic father friend who came to see the patch where he was about to build this house. And this father had had a prayer, saw a dream rather, beforehand. And when he saw the ground, he went up a hill and turned around, and there exactly the patch of land that he'd seen in his dream. That was a real encouragement that they were on the right lines. Isn't it wonderful how God works in different people, but to the same end? But here's the lovely story. So there were 9 kids there, between 18 and 28, missionaries in training. They were there for 9 months each. It was so exciting. And they said, "Oh, you're going to come and climb the hill behind the prayer house." Now, in fact, the two people we were with, not particularly active, and we were slightly short for time, so we didn't. But I said, tell us about the hill. Now, what they do, they have what's called the Stations of the Cross, if you like, the stations that the elements from Jesus's condemnation by Pilate all the way through to him, his cross, and his being laid in the tomb, and it's been laid out at various stations called the Stations of the Cross. And you climb this hill and you go through the Stations of the Cross. Here's the story. An American couple with their 4-year-old daughter were visiting, and they thought, we must do the Stations of the Cross. So they climbed this hill, and it takes apparently about 45 minutes. They got to the top, going through the various stations. And of course, the last station is on the top of this hill. And they were so taken up with what was going on that they lost track of their daughter. Now, the hill's quite steep. And of course, suddenly they realized what was going on, and they turned around, and she was nowhere to be seen. And there was a very steep drop on one side. And so every parent's worst nightmare, oh my goodness, we've been all spiritual here, and our daughter's fallen off the mountain. So heart in mouth, they go and barely dare look, but they just look over the edge of this hill, down the steep drop, just seeing their little daughter just climbing up the last bit and coming to see them with a big smile on her face. "Oh, darling, we were so worried." She said, "Oh, don't worry. A very nice man with large wings helped me up." I think, that's nice. That's very good. Now, there's things about the Catholic faith that I have difficulties with, but angels and healing and security and saving people, I have no difficulty with at all. That was a lovely point. Then they told me a second story. This Catholic prayer house is linked with a place in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And of course, in the 90s, there was the terrible war where the old Yugoslavia split. And within this place in Bosnia-Herzegovina today, there was a man, a Catholic, who was feeding 15 to 20 of his friends, neighbours, during the war. And he had 6 bullocks. So from time to time, he'd slaughter a bullock, he'd put it in the freezer, take it out, and of course he could feed people. But the bullocks were going down, and they were all male. So no new cows on the horizon. 6 became 5, became 4, 3, 2, 1, and then no bullocks. So his friends kept coming because they had nowhere else to feed during the war. And one of his friends said, "Well, what are we going to do?" He said, "Well, just keep coming. We'll eat." And he said, so he opened up his freezer, and there it was, full of meat. But then they take the meat out, and there's no new bullocks. So the friend came back the next day and said, "What are we going to do? There's no more meat." He said, "Come and take a look at the freezer." Open the freezer. It's full. And day after day, the freezer was full. Nobody was supplying it, apart from our God. And I think what I learned in Scotland was that we have an awesome God who's created this amazing landscape, animals, plants, rocks, just gorgeous. And he also creates security for us, like the American couple whose child was saved. And he also looks after us in times of war and in times of plenty, but also in times of lack. This is a God who cares and who's involved in our lives. And I came back thinking, I know some of this stuff already, Lord, and and it's so good to be reminded, and of course to meet people on fire for the Lord and meet youngsters about to become missionaries. There's one from Australia, Canada, America, several from England, going back into their areas and wanting to share faith. Very, very encouraging. So I came back pretty encouraged. I just wanted to share with people today, and I'm sure your listeners have got other stories which they can bring to you. We serve an awesome God, a God of refuge, a God of strength, and a God who supplies the needs of his people. So there we are. Nothing particularly medical today. I've read some things from medicine in the paper, which, they're okay. It's encouraging, but I'm drawn back to the Maker, to the Creator, and I've just seen examples of his creation. If anyone has an opportunity to go to Scotland, take it up. It's stunning.
It's one of my favourite. When I was driving trucks, I used to love it getting a Scotland trip. It was 3 or 4 days, and that's absolutely fine by me. You're not going to be bothered on the way up because it's so far to get there. And it was great. And there was a point when you leave the M6 and you keep on going up into Scotland, and then there's a couple of bends that happen with the mountains. Suddenly, they sort of suddenly appear. They're coming, and yet they still seem kind of a shock of where did they come from? And you realise that all you can see is mountains, and it is stunning. It is beautiful. I remember taking my kids up for the first time when they were old enough to enjoy what they could see and understand it. And it was just glorious. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. and it's beautiful. And it points to God being a beautiful God. He didn't have to make this world so pretty, but he chose to. And when we get so caught up, don't we, on the TV with terrible things in Manchester, or now in a mosque in Sussex, and and if you're not careful, we can get blinded to the fact that actually there's so much wonderful stuff out there. Beauty, there's God intervening in our lives, doing wonderful things, and of course His people also do wonderful things because they serve a wonderful God. But He's a God of beauty, and a God of holiness, and a God of awe. How lucky we are, how blessed we are to worship Him.
Yeah, I love the fact that just the humble rainbow, you get some rain.
Rainbows.
Yeah. Oh. You get some sun, and then it's just that God did not need to make it happen like that. It could have just been rain. He's designed everything, so it didn't need. We don't need to see the rainbow. And more than that, we actually get to enjoy seeing it, and it creates a happy. All the thing. It's just what God did, creating the ability for the rainbow, us to be able to see the rainbow. The fact it makes us happy. It's just that's God's creative flair, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it was great. So I was blessed and come back to thinking, wow, yeah, I'm ready, Lord. What's next?
What's now? I love that. What's next? Now, of course, if you've been missing the voice of Richard for a while, he's now back, which is great. Mm-hmm. But you retired from being a GP or family practitioner in the States after many, many years, and you went on a sabbatical. But I love one of the last things we talked about, which I wanted to touch on again, when we talked about the word retired. But you came back with not retired, but tired, and we changed the I for a Y, like fresh rubber on the car. What am I doing next? And I just wanted to reflect on that, since you've been retired for a little time now.
Yes.
How are you looking back at the time you spent, I suppose, in gainful employment? How do you reflect on that now that that's not what you have to do, because it's a job you've got to go to work? How do you feel now as you look forward to whatever's coming next?
Well, friend of mine, number one, by the way, I didn't invent the retired. I stole it from someone else. I wish I had done, but I didn't. And also, I didn't invent the fact that somebody told me the other day that retirement is a gift. And I think, like all gifts, it needs to be received and then used. So, say somebody gave me as a 4-year-old boy a gift of a car, a toy car to play with, and I think that's nice, and I never play with it. Then the gift hasn't been hugely useful. It's been misused, in a sense, just unused. And I think that's the question for me, is that now that I've got new tyres, how am I going to use, how's the car, if I'm taking that analogy, with the new tyres? Where's it going to drive? And, time shortens as you get retired. You're not as young as you were. And thank God I'm 65. And He's given me breath still in my body. But what do you want me to do, Lord God? And I ran a church meeting across the churches on Sunday night, just gone last Sunday, and I was so encouraged by a number of people who said, "Okay, we're sharing this vision, but wanted to create a big mission hub in our parish. Where do we go next?" I said, "Well, I'm actually asking you for wisdom. We've asking a lot of combined wisdom for this one." And there were most people there were older than me. And I'm thinking, God has given us wisdom. The Proverbs, which I've been reading, says grey hair is to the glory of the person who wears it. Why? Well, because they've lived long enough to have grey hair. Even if they haven't got very much hair, as in my case, they've lived long enough to have grey hair. And along the way, you may not be as fast or as fit as you were. You've got experience, you've got wisdom all being well. And when you combine that wisdom with others, then suddenly that's a powerful combination. Combine it with others and under God, then we're talking. So I think that's what excites me, is that I don't know where it's going. A bit like you don't know day to day necessarily where your radio show's going, but you're just trying to obey and keep the car going in the direction God wants it to go. And that is the challenge, because we can all go off. And boy, have I done so in my life from time to time, badly, always to my detriment, I would say. But I want to keep on track with the Lord. So that's the challenge. I've got the tyres, I've got some energy, there's a bit of petrol in the tank, but I need to go in the right direction. And that's the challenge through prayer to find that.
I love that. I just thought it was good just to touch on base on it, because you've been away for kind of about a month or so, as you've been obviously going around Scotland, just taking some time, I suppose, to unlearn what it was that you were doing, to be able to have the opportunity to learn afresh what God might have in store for you. But the easiest way of doing that is actually to take a pause and stop and think, Let's stop. John Kirby's a classic example, sets up Christians against poverty.
Yes.
He hits retirement. He retires thinking, okay, this is all good. He talks about how much he loved not being in the spotlight all the time, that people didn't recognize him. He loved that. And then God laid on his heart something else called the I-61 movement. And then he's gone on a different track. But he took stopping and pausing and slowing down for long enough in order to hear from God what is in store for him next.
Well, I'm excited you mentioned that because I just got the October issue of the Pure magazine today, and his mugshot is on the front. So I'm guessing there's an article about him somewhere within the magazine. So I'm looking forward to reading more because, it's not retirement isn't just the end. It's an end, but it's not the end. The end is when, either Jesus comes again or God calls us home. Until then, there's work to do. It's just different from what you've been doing previously.
I love that approach. Richard Scott, thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you back on. I've missed you on my radio show every Tuesday afternoon. It's great to have you back. If you do have any questions or topics you would like Richard to cover, look at, consider, you can let us know. Email is always good. hello@pure247radio.org. hello@pure247radio.org. And it's always asked anonymously, so I don't care what you write. I'm not reading your name out. Richard Scott, it's great to have you back. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me something to look up for next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rated 5 stars by Sorted Magazine's film critic, Pure 247 takes you behind the scenes of the birth of a global Christian radio station. Andy B will have you laughing and crying as you discover what it takes to create ministry that matters in this inspiring tale of perseverance, honesty, and vulnerability. Buckle up and get ready for a story that's uplifting as it is entertaining. Behind the microphone, they face bankruptcy, eviction, and 2 life-changing surgeries. Can they make it? Will they make it? Get your copy of this life-changing book today. Pure 247 is available now on Amazon. Andy B is best described as a man after God's own heart, who insists that God's vision and resourcing trump all handicaps.